You would be surprised. You would think that only a certain type of man goes to a strip club or to pay a prostitute for sex. But actually, you find so many types of different men. And at the end of the day, at the core, every man wants the same. They want to be understood, they want to be valued, they want to be appreciated, and they want to provide and protect. But they want the appreciation from that. At the end of the day, that is something that the sex work industry taught me about men. And I'm so grateful for all of that journey because I got to really see beyond the armors that men carry. Welcome to the Deeper Please podcast. I'm Eliza, dating and intimacy coach, Mexican medicine woman, and feminine and masculine energy expert. I personally believe that we humans get to self-actualize through the path of opening our hearts. So this podcast has been designed for you to peel back the layers and discover who you get to be as an open-hearted human in this lifetime. I will be sharing with you heart-expanding and mind-bending tools and concepts for you to create deeper and more fulfilling conscious relationships with yourself and with the world around you. So with that said, open your heart, turn the volume up, and let's go deeper. Okay, welcome back to part 2 of the Unfiltered, Untold story behind my journey. Today, I'm here again with my beautiful friend, Zoe. If you happen to stumble into this episode and you haven't listened to part 1, I highly recommend you to go and do so. There are a lot of parts of my story that maybe you haven't heard before. I really hope that this inspires you and that this gives voice to those of you who have gone through trauma and difficult beginnings. And I'm hoping that this gives you hope and strength and inspires you to create an amazing life regardless of what you've been through. So welcome, Zoe. Thank you for being here again, interviewing me for this episode.
Yes, it's an honor. I'm so excited to help you share this story. So just to recap everyone with what we talked about in the last episode, Eliza shared with us super open-heartedly about her childhood, what happened with her parents, the relationship that she had with people at a young age and how that affected her into her adolescence and early adulthood. But I feel like we jumped a lot of steps. So let's step back and go backwards in time when you were going out of high school and into university. What happened at that point?
I will begin with an important turning point just before turning 18. This was when the last string of relationship I had with my father, this is after the abuse had ended years before. And there was this last relationship, quote unquote, right? He was kind of supporting me financially with school here and there, crumbs, basically. So a part of me, the little girl inside of me, was still clinging onto that receiving it as a form of love. At this point, I'm still in deep freeze mode. I don't know what the heck happened. I couldn't still make much sense of things. And when I'm about to turn 18, I'm already in university, and he says to me that I'm on my own, that he will not support me financially any longer. In that moment, there was something inside of me that crumbled. My heart was shattered when he said he wouldn't support me anymore. To me, may as well was like saying, I don't love you anymore. It meant something big. I remember feeling so sad about that. It was like the little girl inside me was clinging onto that financial support as a way to feel loved. When he said that, I just remember feeling this kind of sadness and grief, but also a wave of rage. I was so angry. And I remember just inside of me saying to myself, just fucking watch me how I do it without you. That's when I say that in that moment was born my hyper-independent woman. This is an archetype that I talk about in my work, and that a lot of us have developed when we have to mature fast, too young, too soon. Nobody teaches us how, but you just have to take care of yourself in any way that you can learn. So I think a lot of us have that moment in our lives. You have to learn to take care of yourself in whatever way you find. So that's when I call it becoming the hyper independent woman, because that makes us this story that I cannot trust anyone, I cannot rely on anyone, and I'm the only one to rely on. And so that was the moment for me when I became that hyper independent woman. And that really came from an energy of proving that I could do it without him. I wanted to show him and the world that I didn't need anyone to succeed. I was very hungry to succeed ever since I was a child, even going through the trauma, the abuse, and the dysfunctionality in my household. I always had this hunger and this inner knowing to succeed. I always knew I was going to do big things. So at this point, I was like, okay, I'm going to do it by myself. I'm going to fucking prove it. So at this point, I have two options. I can stop university for a while to work and make enough money to sustain myself, or resourceful Eliza, I was like, I can go and strip. I can go and just maybe make money at the weekends, stripping and dancing, and I can sustain myself, and I can even help my family, because at this point, my mom is raising 3 children, and I wanted to be not a burden to her, but I wanted to be a help and a support. So at this point, I chose the second option.
What I love or find really interesting about this is that you became the provider in a way, which, as you mentioned, is very much masculine energy. And ironically, you're using and manipulating your feminine body and being in order to provide in this masculine way.
Right? At the end of the day, this is something that I always tell my clients. You might have done crazy things, or you might have developed dysfunctional patterns. You might have done things maybe not in the healthiest way. Maybe it came from pain, it came from trauma. But at the end of the day, you learn to take care of yourself in any way that that you could. So I am grateful for this part of me that was so fucking brave to go and dance on a stage at barely 18 and learn to take care of herself, supported her family. Yeah, it was through manipulation and using my body and disrespecting myself. I didn't know better. And I'm still grateful for that part of me. And now I know better. And it has been my journey to evolve out of those patterns and becoming a different woman. And it's all perfect. It's all part of the journey. This is something that might be a little bit controversial or an unpopular opinion, but I am grateful for my trauma. I am grateful for the journey. I would not change a single thing now that I've gone through the healing and that I am the woman that I am now. I can recognize that it all shaped me, and my trauma has been a path to my purpose. And I totally believe that our trauma gets to be a part of our purpose. We can choose whether we make our trauma the reason why we don't succeed in life, or we don't create the life we want, or we can make that the very fucking reason why. We can make that the path to our purpose, to our best life, and to our dream relationships. So by the time I'm 19, I'm fully like the sole provider of my entire family, my mom and my 2 siblings. I was stripping on the weekends and going to uni Monday to Friday. And, that was me feeling like I was thriving. I had everything I wanted. So by the time I'm 21, this is another turning point. Eliza just wanted to learn English, but I didn't want to learn it in Mexico. I was like, no, I need to immerse myself in an English speaking environment. And funny enough, I never felt called or compelled to go to the States. Ever since I was a child, I was like, I want to go to Canada, I want to go to Europe. And I always saw myself going to Europe. So, anyways, when I'm 21, I'm like, I'm going to go to Canada to learn English. So, I worked my ass off. I sold my car. By this point, I'm living by myself. I'm completely independent. I'm stripping and studying at the same time. And then I took myself to Canada. Before I finished university, I moved there. I moved to Canada for 6 months. So that was another big turning point in my life, because when I went to Canada, only a week later, that's when I met the man that became my partner for the next 9 years. I didn't even speak English at this point. He was Irish, and I don't know how we communicated. He didn't speak Spanish either, but we did. Because of this relationship, I spent a lot of time in Canada. And what I want to say about this relationship and how important it was in my life, apart from shaping my journey because of the geographical points where I got to see the world a lot through this, because I was in this relationship. I got kind of in the circumstances to be moving a lot in the world. But this is before I ever have my first spiritual awakening. This is before I ever go into personal development. And what I can say about this relationship is, now that I look back, I can see all the dysfunctional patterns that I was playing with men. At this point, I was proud of wearing the pants in this relationship. And I was proud of being the one that made all the decisions. And I was proud of being the one that always chose the restaurant to go for dinner, the trips we were going to make, this kind of thing. And I used to believe that that was a form of love on his part, to let me just choose and decide everything. But a part of me inside was tired of being always in that position. And I didn't know better. I now know that I couldn't relax. I couldn't let him be the man properly, because I needed to have that sense of control, which is something that is created by trauma.
Yeah. And do you think that this is something you observe a lot in your clients as well?
Absolutely. There are so many cases that I see where, as women, when we have been operating in this hyper independent woman, that's one of the main traits, to be the boss in the relationship. Again, it gives us a false sense of safety because it gives us control. But at the same time, a part of ourselves is like, why don't you make more decisions? I remember saying this to my partner, like, why don't you make more decisions? Why don't you take the lead? I will complain about this. But the truth is that I wasn't looking at how I did not give him the freaking chance to do that. I did not give him the space to do that. And this is what I see in clients as well, that women continue to blame the partner. Why aren't you more masculine? Why aren't you leading more? Why aren't you making more decisions, making more plans? And we forget to look at, where am I not giving you the space to do that? Where am I complaining and nagging and criticizing when you try to plan something? Where am I giving you the space, quote unquote, and maybe letting you plan day night and then complain about the restaurant that you picked and thinking you cannot plan or do it as well as I can? That's so common, like sometimes women come to me with the question, what if he cannot plan? What if he's bad at planning? What if he is not organized enough and I always have to step up? And I always tell them, is it true that he cannot plan and organize? Or that's what you choose to believe? So that's really where we get to look at our own part in it and give your man the chance to fuck up once, two times, three times until he learns. Like, you have to trust your man.
So, in all of these times, obviously, you weren't fully awakened yet when you were in the relationship because now you're reflecting and seeing the dysfunction. But while you were together, were you still engaging in the sex work? Were you the one providing him in other ways aside from like planning everything? Or how did the masculine show up in this relationship?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. There is a reason why we were together for that long. He was a good man. He showed up in the best ways he could. He did provide for me in many ways. He was a safe man. He was good-hearted. We just didn't have very much knowledge about what a conscious relationship gets to be, and we just did whatever the best we could with what we had. Yeah, we traveled a lot together. We loved each other deeply. No, that's no doubt. There is no doubt of that. I was a crazy bitch at this time. When I was in my 20s,
Only in your 20s?
Well, now I'm a conscious crazy bitch.
You're crazy in a different way.
Exactly. Back then I was an unconscious crazy bitch, which is dangerous. So back then I had all these patterns of insecurities. Sexual trauma creates a lot of insecurities within you, a lot of wounds in your self-worth. And I didn't know how unworthy I felt, how unlovable I felt. And that really reflected in how I was playing patterns of jealousy, over controlling, nagging, overly criticizing my man. All of these patterns came from my deep insecurities and lack of self-worth and feelings of unlovability, which are very common ones for people who have gone through complex trauma and especially sexual trauma. So yeah, I was so jealous with him. I didn't even want him to go with his male friends. Every time it was a crazy fight about this, because I couldn't believe that he wanted to spend time with his male friends. I would make that mean that he didn't love me enough, and he or that I wasn't interesting enough if he wanted to spend time with his male friends. In my little world, in my trauma, I had no room for the idea that he loved me and wanted to be with me, and at the same time he wanted to have a good time with other friends without me. That didn't exist. It's crazy.
Yeah, like in this trauma perspective and this like need for control, the idea that he could have his own world and like you not be a part of every aspect of his world was too much to like you. It wasn't even an option to consider.
Exactly. I was like, if I'm not your entire world,
then it's not love.
Yeah. And for a very long time, I was in that energy that I wanted to be the center of someone's world. And I thought that meant love. Now, I don't want to be the center of anyone's world. Do I want to feel like a priority? Yeah, absolutely. But I don't want to be the center of someone's world. So, yeah, big codependency patterns during that relationship. Nonetheless, it was a beautiful relationship, and it served me in so many ways. And so when I had my first spiritual awakening at the end of my 20s, towards 28, 29, then I left that relationship.
Can you remind us about the spiritual awakening again?
Yeah, around 27, 28, something started shifting within me. Like, I was so hungry to become better, to improve my life in many ways. And I became vegan. I wanted to feel healthier. I started healing my relationship to alcohol because during my entire 20s, I had been coping a lot with alcohol and drugs and partying. Typical pattern of coping with trauma. especially after working, in the sex work industry, I needed. At some point, I became an alcoholic. I was pretty much drinking every single day of my life. So when we moved to the UK, that was like a change for me, because I left the sex work. I was working in a normal job in hospitality as a waitress and then a manager. I just started feeling this need to improve my life. So when I find yoga or yoga finds me, I started feeling all these crazy things. As I said before, I did not have a point of reference of anyone who practiced spirituality or yoga or breath work or anything to do with spirituality at all. And then suddenly I just want to be more flexible. And then I realized that there is a body below my neck. There is this connection, this weird thing that I feel when I breathe consciously, when I try to stay present instead of thinking of the past or the future. And that was the first time I ever feel like, oh, what's this? What's this?
Like you're a being.
Yeah, it was like the beginning of coming back to myself, coming back to me. So that's probably 6 months after I found yoga in Eliza's fashion. I want to go head first into this. I want to certify myself. I was doing yoga like 3 hours per day. I was crazy about it. And then I took myself to India to certify myself as a yoga teacher. And just before going to India and on this trip of rediscovering myself, I left the long-term relationship.
I feel like this is really beautiful because to tie it into the other experiences you had, it's like first you have this really messed up dynamic with your father. And because of that, you learn that your body is a way to control men and for you to have the power in a situation. So then you start using your body in ways to not only explore what you think is love at this point, but you also then use your body to provide for your family by being a sex worker and by being a stripper. And we actually haven't talked that much about it. So if you wanted, we can like dig deeper into that later. But now that we are talking about your spiritual awakening, it's like now you're learning how to use your body for yourself and how to like reassociate with your body and use your body to make these clear decisions of like what's actually aligned with what you want in life.
Yeah, exactly. It was day and night, just coming back into my body. These moments through yoga, coming back into my body was that realization of how disconnected I'd been before. I was using my body purely as an instrument to make money, to earn validation, to earn love, to earn acceptance. And at the same time, that was the way I was meeting my needs. From making money to feeling desired and loved and validated by men. So I was winning, that's what my nervous system needed to feel that I was doing something right or that I was worthy, even though very underneath the layers, there were all these feelings of unworthiness and unlovability.
Totally. And it's also interesting because it feels like you are using your body from the perspective of how men or how you felt men saw your body. But now when you had the spiritual awakening, you're tapping into your body the way that you feel within it, like what actually is right. Okay. So then you had this awakening, you left the relationship. Like what happened after that?
Yeah, that's when I went on that trip to India and then to Southeast Asia. This was my self-discovery journey. And then I finally came back to Mexico. When I come back to Mexico, this is when I re-encounter Emma, my ex-girlfriend. This is when we're going to the same-sex relationship. What do you want to know about that?
Yeah. Okay, so have you always known that you were interested in women, or when did this start for you? Was it just Emma triggered something inside you? Is it because you had like these crazy experiences with dudes and you're like, I'm done? Or when did you realize that you're into women?
So first of all, I always knew I was bisexual. Actually, my first kiss, you know this, was with a girl when I was a child. Literally, I was 4 years old, and my little neighbor, just like, we are playing with dolls and whatever, but she's a few years older than me, and she kissed me in the mouth. We were both children, little girls, and that was my first kiss. I remember this barely, right? I was 4 years old. But becoming a teenager again, my first kiss as a teenager, being like 11 or 12, was also with a girl. But I was always attracted to boys as well. So equally, my entire life, since I have memory, I've been attracted to both. So when I come back to Mexico and I reconnect with Emma, it was through a kind of a tragic thing, because I came back to Mexico and I went straight to stay with my best friend, who was living in Cozumel at that time, which is an island right by Playa del Carmen, where I live right now. This is one of the things where I do really see God's grace. For some reason, I picked a random day to come back to Mexico. I arrived to my friend's house. He had been sick, but apparently he was getting better. And we spent 3 days together, and then he passes away. This was only 3 days after I arrived to Mexico. For some reason, I had the blessing to spend the last 3 days of his life taking care of him. We were laughing, we were watching movies, I was making him meals, and then he passes. So Emma was a friend of his. So at the funeral, I reencounter Emma. Really crazy that at the funeral, I reconnect with my with this girl. We, after the funeral, go and celebrate his life. My best friend who passed, Fede, he was a very, very lively guy. He loved partying. He loved tequila shots. He loved weed. And so all of his friends after the funeral were like, we need to go and celebrate his life the way he would want us to do it. Like, this is what he would want. So we went to a friend's house, and we are taking shots of tequila and talking about the memories with him, and having all these beautiful conversations about him. And in that moment, Emma is sitting beside me, and then I just turn around to see her, and this is when I see her the closest I've ever seen her, and I was like, oh, you are beautiful. But this is a very fucked up time, because my heart is so broken. My best friend had just passed. We just buried him. So I had a shot of tequila. There is a cloud of weed smoke. And my friend just passed, and I'm looking at this girl that looks gorgeous. And I'm like, what is happening? No, Eliza, you're not thinking straight. You need to go home. But before I go home, I kiss her.
You go from you set the stage up like, oh, I'm going to be responsible, but actually no.
Yeah, I was like, you don't know what you're doing, Eliza. I just go home. But before I go home, I just kiss her. So that was the beginning of that relationship. Also, I always knew I was bisexual. However, I never thought I could fall in love with a woman until her. And also, I was kind of done with men, to be honest. A part of me was like, I'm done with men.
Do you think that this also has to do with your journey and necessity with healing your relationship to the feminine and the masculine too? It's like you've gone through this whole period where you're so masculine, like in needing control and to provide and all of those things, that now you like went onto the other side of the spectrum. You're like, all right, masculine away.
Yeah, definitely. I think subconsciously it was the part of me that just wanted to relax a bit. And I did not have a point of reference of being fully relaxed with a man. So a part of me thought, maybe I can relax here with this girl. And we went full on typical lesbian fashion. We moved in together after a month dating, typical. we moved fast, and it was such a beautiful relationship. We grew together a lot, and this is when I actually started really, really deepening my healing journey with the masculine. Ironically, I didn't have any contact with men at this point in any way, and that's when I dove into the relationship with healing the masculine. Funny enough, because I wanted to make more money. It was because of money. I knew that money had a relationship with the masculine. It meant masculine energy. So I wanted to build my business and make money. I didn't want to heal my relationship with the masculine because of men.
Yeah.
I was like, fuck men at this point. Funny enough, a year and a half later, when I was with Emma, and I feel this energetic healing with the masculine, then there came this point where I was like, I feel like I can trust men again. I feel I trust money and I trust God, and I feel this love, genuine love and reverence for the masculine as a whole. What would it be to actually be around a man from this place? And I couldn't help but wonder, but I still loved Emma and I wanted to be with Emma. And so I came to her and I told her the truth. I was, babe, I love you. And I also want to feel like what it feels like to be around a man, around masculine energy in the physical realm with this level of healing and love for the masculine. So we opened up the relationship. She gave permission to go and date men. And it marked two things. One, me asking for what I needed. That was very important, because that making that request to her was very scary. I fucking love that woman. I still love her. She's an angel. And but really coming from that place of asking for what I wanted and owning my desire. And two, that was the beginning of making our relationship really conscious, because we did it in a very conscious way. That was us practicing conscious relating, tending to each other's desires and needs. And it was very beautiful, a beautiful process.
It sounds amazing. And it definitely takes a very grounded person to open up a relationship like that with you. So shout out to Emma. Let's go frogs. So how would you say that in the relationship with Emma, like how was being with a woman, how did the energy within that relationship feel different than the energy with a man? And then did that carry on in your future relationships?
That's a great question, because with Emma, there was a beautiful dance between the both of us. We were both feminine and masculine at the same time. So we would switch. It was this dance of whatever is needed, we'll do what is needed for the relationship, for the team. So it was a real teamwork in that partnership. In that relationship with Emma, I healed so much of my own inner masculine, not only because of the money work and all of this that I was doing, but I was embodying my own inner masculine with her, providing emotional safety to her through the opening of the relationship. For example, she would trust me a lot in terms of giving to her, providing to her in every single way. At some point, she was the breadwinner. At some point, I was the breadwinner. So we both got to experience this beautiful balance of giving and receiving in true partnership. So that was also it was crucial for me. And it was so beautiful. I'm grateful for that experience, because I got to be in the role of the provider and breadwinner. I got to a point where I was like, oh, this is why men feel so good to provide for a woman. Like, it feels really good to be the provider of a family. I was like, this is my healthy masculine providing from such a clean place. If my inner masculine became that big dick energy, like in such a good way.
Yeah, it sounds like the difference is you weren't trying to control because you could trust that she loved and cared about you. So you weren't trying to put yourself out there to like to have control and like a grip on the situation, because you didn't have to, because she showed up in a way that made you feel safe.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And that's why when I hear men say, no, I am not a provider, or women who want to be provided for are just gold diggers or blah, 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 I'm like, dude, I can coach you. I've been a soul provider. And when you do it from the right energy, actually, my inner masculine felt hard, because that's what I say, big dick energy. It's so empowering. It feels so good to take care of someone from that place. It's beautiful. That experience, along with having been in the sex work industry for so many years, I got to talk to so many men as well that back then I didn't realize. But now that in hindsight, I know how much it helped me also heal my relationship to men, because I got to really have so many deep conversations with men. You would be surprised. You would think that only a certain type of man goes to a strip club or to pay a prostitute for sex. But actually, you find so many types of different men. And at the end of the day, at the core, every man wants the same. They want to be understood, they want to be valued, they want to be appreciated, and they want to provide and protect. But they want the appreciation from that. At the end of the day, that is something that the sex work industry taught me about men. And I'm so grateful for all of that journey, because I got to really see beyond the armors that men carry, trying to be, like always strong and really always this competitive energy. There is always a beautiful heart behind every man. And I'm so grateful for that.
It's incredible. You've had some really powerful experiences that were obviously really tough. But it's so special that, one, you were able to pull the best lessons out of that. And also through some of the trauma, like losing your friend, also find some of the best people like Emma. So at one point earlier, you mentioned that you felt like God really brought you two together, or maybe even your friend, like in collaboration with God, brought you two together. And I know that you talk about God and like the divine a lot in your work. So how would you say your relationship with God affects the work that you do?
Yeah, I love this question. And you're right. I always say that my friend Fede actually didn't want to leave me alone. And that's why he left me with Emma. That's why Emma and I connected in his freaking funeral. And I don't think that's a crazy thing or it was an accident. It was my friend doing his thing, like telling me, babe, I'm not gonna leave you alone. Here you go, this beautiful angel. And then Emma and I are together for 2.5 years after that. So yeah, my relationship with God really depended when I started doing this deeper healing with the masculine. As I said in the last episode, I went so deep into healing my feminine because I started seeing this typical content about the feminine, that the feminine surrenders and flows and relaxes and this kind of things. I was like, that sounds great. Let me explore that. So I go into healing my feminine, but then I'm still like, okay, yeah, I'm relaxing a little more. I feel more connected to my body, and this feels great. But I'm still not making money. I'm still feeling like I cannot surrender in the bedroom, and I still need to cling onto a lot of control. So that's when I went into the masculine, healing the masculine, and that I had both kind of side to side. And this is what I always recommend my clients. You cannot look just at one side. If you want to be an integrated woman, I always recommend you to look at both your feminine and your masculine. So this is when I really went into deepening my relationship with God, because growing up, I had a lot of mixed signals about God. My mom wanted to give me some of religion, but my father always said that God didn't exist. So what do I believe? It was a little crazy. So at this point, when I'm already into my journey, I decided, I know I'm not alone. I know there is a bigger force in this universe. And I started connecting to God in the form of universe. I would call it universal intelligence or universal force. And then I finally healed my relationship to the word God without thinking that it meant religion or punishment or this. I think a lot of us can relate to that conditioning that comes from religion, that means about going, that God is some dude in the sky that is just watching you to see how you're behaving and always checking if you're good or bad. So going into that relationship with God was recognizing that there is a bigger force, and I reclaimed the word God, and that's the word that I use the most. And it was for me choosing that this is not about being right or wrong. This is about becoming in integrity and in alignment with what is true in my heart and with what is true for me, not only coming from my head, not only coming from a place of being good or bad, but what feels right, what feels in integrity, what feels like it's in alignment with the highest good, even if that means I don't like it. Even if that means that a part of me doesn't agree with it, if it's in alignment with the highest good of me and everyone involved, that is God to me. It's coming from love. It's being the embodiment of love. It's a very abstract concept, but coming back to this for me has been huge because this is the piece that also allowed me to relax and surrender to life.
What was it about this that allowed you to surrender? Like, how did this give you that permission?
Because I stopped trying to control everything. I stopped trying to outsmart God, trying to know how everything is going to happen. Like knowing that there is a big vision that I'm meant to create. That big vision is not made up from my head. My head couldn't come up with that. So that inner knowing and that faith that is happening regardless, it's happening, there is no fucking question. That feeling of faith is what allows me to surrender to life and to be like, okay, every single thing that comes my way is training me. It's training me to create that vision. I don't see it as an obstacle. I don't see it as something that maybe means that I'm not meant to create something amazing. I don't see it as something to make it mean something wrong about me. I see it as God's training. Every challenge, everything that comes my way in my business, in my relationships, in life, it's God training me.
That's beautiful. So obviously, like God touches so many aspects of your life, and the divine shows up in your work as well. So I know you use the term like the divine feminine a lot. How would you describe that to someone?
I actually made a whole episode on what the divine feminine is. This is actually the first episode of this season. But for me, living in the divine feminine and how that shapes my coaching, I love guiding women to come back to that core and nature, back to their hearts, coming back to remembering their own divinity, that they're not only bones and flesh, but they also are a soul. They are just going for a little ride here in this human experience and remembering that we are way beyond this human experience. That's what I love to remind them of, because that's when we remember our power.
Do you have some examples of specific ways that you help clients connect with the divine feminine?
Yeah, it's always coming back to their body, always coming back to their heart. This is probably an unconventional way for me approaching spirituality. There are teachings of spirituality that teach us to transcend the body, like sit in meditation for an hour until you feel that you leave your body. If you like that, if that's your jam, be my guest. To me, it's the I use the opposite. I believe that our body is a path to connect to the divine. It's a path to connect to God. The human experience is the channel to connect to God. That's why I use a lot of Tantra and sacred sexuality practices, because that's what Tantra says. Tantra is that connection of the earth and heaven, is utilizing our body and or even our sexual energy to connect with the divine. So that's really the approach that I use. I will not tell my clients sit in meditation for 1 hour until you transcend your body. I tell them dive into the depth of your emotions, dive into your heart, and go as deep as you can. That's why deeper, please, right? Go below the neck as deep as you can. Remember who you are through that path.
What does the actual practice look like when you're integrating these parts of yourself?
So there are multiple tools that I use. I use a lot of breath work. I personally practice breath work almost every day, even sacred sexuality practices like self-pleasure. And self-pleasure doesn't mean masturbation. It's just like, it can, definitely, but it's not only about rubbing your clit until you come. Self-pleasure, self-pleasure in my world is about being present in your human body. It can mean some even non-sexual self-touch, massaging your body, opening the heart by massaging your breast. Breast massage is another of my favorite tools that I teach my clients to open the heart. Massaging our womb, connecting to our yoni, which is the Sanskrit word for pussy, just to mention some of the practices. That's without going into the deeper practices that I use, for example, for rewiring the mind and the beliefs and shadow work. We go into a lot of mirror work, and I really guide them, like literally go into the mirror right now, and I'm going to guide you through this practice. My practices and what happens in my calls can be really deep and very intense. That's why it's life-changing. But yeah, I cannot deal with surface level shit. I cannot deal with chat or surface level conversations or surface level relationships. So why would my coaching be surface? I don't know how to do surface shit. So yeah, that's how we roll over here.
Do you have like an example of someone in particular where this really helps them break through?
Yeah, absolutely. I have many clients who, a lot of them come to me for very different reasons. Sometimes they want to heal the relationship with their body. Sometimes they want to have better sex. Sometimes they want to make more money in their business. And why such different topics are spoken about in my coaching practice is because everything is connected. It all comes back to us. So they come to me they can tell me I want better sex or more money. And at the end of the day, I know they want to come back to themselves, be more authentic and be themselves. And when they are doing that, when they're so connected to their essence, they can create everything they want. They can have the good relationship and the money and the good business and the friendships, all of it, right?
Sounds great. Sign me up. I'm ready.
So I've had many cases where I guide my clients through these practices of sacred rage release or the mirror work, reparenting their inner child. And then by the end of I have so many testimonials, by the end of the session, they're like, what the fuck just happened? Yeah. And then when they're like, what the fuck just happened? That's not at all what I was expecting, but thank you. And then from there, obviously it's not an overnight change in life, but after that, there is something that they can see and cannot unsee. That's what I really love about my work and my coaching is that my coaching it's very deep and intense. Also, it's very loving. I have this huge gift and capacity to make someone feel safe. Safety is at the base and core. We cannot go as deep if you're not safe.
So, what is a small practice or one step that someone can take?
I encourage everyone to learn to sit with yourself. Like learn to sit in silence where you are not distracted with a phone, with TV, with Netflix, with food. Learn to be in that discomfort of your own emotions, because that's why we distract and that's why we numb with food, alcohol, sugar, all of the things, because we are avoiding ourselves. And don't get me wrong, sometimes I catch myself going for the chocolate in the fridge because I'm stressed. It's human nature. Being on this path and mastering this doesn't mean that you never get dysregulated. It doesn't mean that you're always super zen. No, but it means that you don't make that wrong about yourself, and two, you don't let yourself indulge into that and that become the way you are on a regular basis. When you are equipped with tools, the point is that you actually learn to be in the discomfort of your own emotions and the human experience, because that's just part of life, right? So learn to sit with yourself, learn to be in the discomfort when you are stressed, learn to breathe slowly. It's freaking crazy. The only thing that we need to fucking be alive is to breathe, and that's something that we're shit at. Like my sister was telling me the other day, I don't know how to breathe. Like the doctor told me that I need to learn to breathe deeper because I'm very shallow. And I'm like, you're not alone. Most people do that. Learn to breathe, learn to practice. There is so much free content on the internet. Go and dive deep within yourself. And if you have been through complex trauma, if it feels really unsafe for you to drop into your body, it doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. There is anything wrong with you. Hire a professional. Go with someone who can teach you to be safe in your own body again. As I said before, it is your responsibility to take care of yourself. So you can always do that.
Well, thank you so much for letting me harass you and steal all these juicy nuggets out of your little noggin. It's so cool to hear this story, and I love hearing it over and over. I know this I've had the pleasure of hearing it as your friend, and so it's cool being able to help you share it with everyone else too.
Thank you so much for helping me with this. Thank you so much to everyone for being here. Thank you again, Zoe. I love you. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Deeper Please podcast. Don't forget to check the show notes for ways to go even deeper. Remember to share this episode with someone you love. And if you feel like sharing with me how this podcast is impacting your life and relationships, feel free to slide into my inbox at I am Eliza V on Instagram. Stay open, stay wild, and see you next time.